Liza Lawrence here with episode 29, A Day I Will Never Forget, a Columbine survivor's story. Welcome to Wonders and Miracles podcast, where we celebrate miraculous moments in everyday lives. I'm your host, Liza Lawrence, a wife, mother, teacher, and miracle lover. If you're new to this podcast, this is what we do here. Each week on Miracle Monday, we celebrate awe-inspiring true stories from regular people like you and me. People who have experienced something surprising and wonderful that could be considered the work of a divine source. My desire is to help us recognize God's hand and His love in our lives, because the more miracles we notice, the more miracles happen. Thanks for listening to the show. Now let's celebrate wonders and miracles together. The Serenity Prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. So on April 20th, 1999, the unthinkable happened at Columbine High School. Lacey was a sophomore attending school that day, and she shares with us on this episode her account of the school shooting and how her desire to save her friend Kelly Fleming was not to be. After struggling with years of guilt and pain for not being able to save her friend, Lacey has an unexplainable spiritual moment that helped her finally let go of all the emotional pain that she had carried for so long. So this episode touches on a really troubling event. And in times of trouble, sometimes we ask, how could God let something like this happen? And something that helps me when I try to make sense of the harshness of this world and how evil can happen is, first of all, I try to acknowledge that there are some things that I do not understand and don't have the capacity to comprehend. I don't understand from God's perspective how things work and why things happen. But I do reflect on the scripture in Isaiah chapter 9, verse 17, where he's talking about the calamities of the world and the evilness of the world. And he says, "For everyone is a hypocrite and an evildoer, and every mouth speaketh folly. For all this his anger is not turned away, but his hand is stretched out still." And as I reflect on that scripture, and I've thought about that a lot lately as I was putting this episode together, realizing that God's hand is stretched out still to everyone. I might not understand, but He does. And it's stretched out to the shooters and to the victims and to the abusers and to the evildoers. His hand is stretched out still. And there are some things in this life that I truly do not have any control over. But there are some things that I do have control over. And one of those is I try to live by the philosophy that Gandhi stated, which was, be the change you wish to see in the world. That's really all we can do, is work on us being the change we want. If we want peace, if we want light, if we want love, those are the attributes we have to work on and practice. So one way that I've tried to do this, and I'm not perfect, is through the practice of meditation and spending that still time with God and in that peaceful place. The scripture, "Be still and know that I am God," truly helps me find peace in this troubling world. So if you'd like some great meditation resources, check out on my sponsors page at wondersandmiracles.com the Meditations on the Mount albums. Or you can also consider taking the meditation course for a more in-depth understanding of meditation. So I'd like to jump right into this episode, but real quick, I want to give a shout out to our fan of the week. And this is from Purveyor of Num Nums. And they say, "Love this podcast, my new favorite. Amazing stories. Some real white-knuckle moments in extraordinary circumstances turn into real-life miracles. All told by people that sound like your neighbors. Great listening." Thanks for that review. And remember, if you'd like to help support the podcast, go write a review on iTunes. I've also been asking favors of everyone to just share it with one person that you know. Think of someone that could use an uplift in their life. I know as I record these stories and talk to these amazing people, I am so uplifted and my life is edified because of it. And I'm so grateful that I have the opportunity to be involved in a project like this and in the movement that miracles still happen every day. So thanks for supporting this podcast and sharing it with your friends. Now let's jump into this episode. I do want to say this might be troubling for young children to hear. I know when my children were listening as I was editing, my 10-year-old, it made her a little bit afraid because it was a little bit scary to think that these things happen. But also keep in mind that God is aware of all of us and He understands what's going on. And in this story, you'll see that some beautiful things have taken place in Lacey's life to help her find peace with this troubling experience. All right, well, I'm here with Lacey today. She's from Colorado, and actually she went to high school at Columbine. So Lacey, thank you so much for being willing to share your story with us, and let's hear what happened.
Absolutely, and I'm so thankful that I can be here to share my story. We will start off by the morning of April 20th. I remember waking up and I went into the bathroom and started getting ready for school.
And how old were you? What grade were you in?
I was a sophomore, so I believe I was about 16 years old. You know, the night after the shooting happened, the night sitting in my living room, I can completely understand why I felt so off that morning. And I'll explain why. So when I was getting ready for school, I happened to look around the wall in my bathroom, and I remember feeling like everything was moving slow motion. And I thought, oh, I hope I'm not getting sick. This is a little bit weird. And so I remember just thinking, like, gotta hurry up and get to school. So I showered and I got ready and I left for school. When I was in my class, the first couple of classes, same movement. I would look to the side and it would feel like kind of just a slow motion feeling in my head, my body. It just felt off. So I would just deal with it. You know, I wasn't sick to my stomach or anything like that. So I felt like I could be at school, but I just felt different. And then my third period class, I was sitting there with my friend, Kelly Fleming, and I had asked her, I said, hey, what are you doing next hour? And she said, oh, I have to go to the library and study for a science project that I have coming up. And I said, oh, yeah, I have math. And she goes, don't you have that test you have to take? And I said, yes. I'm like, I'm so nervous about it. I hope I do good because math has never been my subject. And I was almost to the point of failing, which was the only class I was struggling with. So I had all A's except for that one. I had a D. And I felt like I needed just a pass to get good grades. So I was talking to Kelly about how I needed to pass this test. So the bell had rang and we had both closed our notebooks and stood up. And I remember we went out the door together and kind of got stuck. And I said, no, go first. And she walked in front of me and I had just stopped her after me entering the doorway. And I said, hey, Kelly. I said, hey, why don't we go to lunch? And she said, when? And I was like, well, right now. I was worried about my math test. I said, but you know what? I feel like you and I should just go to lunch at the mall. Because everyone went to lunch at the mall. Not everyone, but a lot of the students did. We have a lot of students in the cafeteria, but there's a lot of people that drove and we would go off campus and go to the mall. And so she said, oh, no, I have got to study for this project. And meanwhile, we're both walking up the stairs and we got to the top of the stairs. And I, the person I am, I usually just drop a subject when someone says no. I usually am like, are you sure? Okay, we'll see you later. But I didn't do that. I had said again, for the third time, I believe, I can help you with your science project. Let's just go to the mall. And she stopped and she's like, no, Lacey, I want you to do your math test because you'll get mad at yourself and I need to go do my science. So we'll just meet up after school and we'll go shopping after school. And I grabbed her hand lightly and I looked her right in the eye and I said, Kelly, let's go to the mall together. I said, it's okay. I'll help you. And she like kind of twisted her arm out of my hand and said, I can't. I really got to go. She walked off and I yelled, I'm like, Kelly. She just kept walking. So I went to class. I just turned around and said, oh gosh, I hope I didn't offend her. I'll just go to math class. So I stopped at my locker first and I put away my other books and I grabbed a few other things out of my locker and I went to class. And I remember sitting in math class and you get extra points if you go up to the board. So they do the problem of the week. And because I was failing, I thought, oh, I should go up there and get some extra points. So after the announcements had happened, the teacher asked who wanted to volunteer to come up to the classroom. And I said, I do. I raised my hand and she called me up and I grabbed the green dry erase marker and I got to write problem of the week. And I specifically remember writing down the number 2. And all of a sudden we all heard bang, 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 very loud. So I stopped. The teacher stopped. She goes, oh, what was that? And she goes, let me go check it out. Because right next door to us was the science classrooms. They would do lots of experiments in there. So she just figured something was going on with the science. So meanwhile, she had left the room calmly. And I stood up there in front of my whole class like, do I continue? Do I just stand here? So we kind of made a joke about it. I said, well, I guess I'll just wait, so I stood up there and it seemed like seconds later, like 10 seconds later, the teacher had ran inside the classroom frantically and she just said, everyone get down. There's 2 men in the school with guns. She's like, get down now. As she's saying that, she ran over to her desk and grabbed her keys and ran back to the door and locked the door. Again, several gunshot noises were happening, probably 10 to 15 at once. And I remember standing up at that board, gripping that green marker. And my friend Ryan had said, Lacey, get down. So he had ran up from his chair and pulled me back. And I squeezed down behind him. I remember holding the back of his sweater, just staring at the carpet, thinking, what is going on? My teacher's phone rang. And she said, hello, okay, well, okay, yes, I can do that type of thing. She's just talking to the other teacher and hung up with them. And she said, everyone get in the corner of my desk. She said, we got to be in this far corner so if the gunman sees us, he won't see us through that door. So we all squished in a huddle next to her desk, trying to be as quiet as we can, but so many people are just crying. And she said, don't worry, guys. I will get you out of here safely. I will do what I can to make sure you guys are safe. Just stay here, stay calm, hold each other's hands. We're strong. We can get through this. And I just remember looking her in the eye and she looked scared. Her phone rang again. She answered it and she said, okay, I'll wait for you to call me again and that will be the plan. And so then again, she hung up and she said, you guys, we have a plan. And the plan is when we get the call, we're going to run out the side of our door. She said, I want you to run to your right because the hallways would look like a big L, like really a big U. But from the middle of our classroom, we would go right and then you would take a quick left and then you're into the main hallway. And then just right off to your right-hand side was the side exit door. So we were fairly close to the exit door. So she said, I want you guys to run as fast as you can and don't look back. And so we waited and waited and waited for this phone call.
And what was that like?
I was so numb. I was so scared. I was shaking. I was crying. I was so scared because I'm like, what is happening right now? Because meanwhile, waiting and waiting and waiting, you just hear nonstop gunshots. You hear screaming. You hear just chaos. And not knowing, all you're told is you have these 2 men shooting in the school. Come stand over here. It was just like slow motion numb. You know what I mean? The phone finally rang and she said, everyone run. And she opened her door. And I remember all of us just feet to feet, just running, squishing through each other down the hall. one of the hardest things that I heard while running was a bang, bang, and I heard a very loud female scream, and then another bang, and it got quieter, and it was a third bang, and I could hear someone drop.
Mm.
And I remember looking behind me and seeing just a leg laying there. I don't even know where the other half of the body was. It must have been hidden behind a locker or a doorway or something like that. But there was a person literally laying there.
Mm.
And I just continued to run. So I ran out that side door, and we ran all across the street, and we ran to that Leawood Park, and all just huddled up there. And there was a few teachers at this point outside in that park just saying, everyone, stay calm, we're going to get through this type thing. And we're just looking at the school, holding each other, just crying and screaming, what's going on? And just holding our friends tight. Then all of a sudden, there was a window that shattered and more gunshots, but it sounded like the gunshots were pointed towards us. And so a teacher yelled, run! And we all just ran. And I remember at this part, I parted with my friend Ryan, and I just took off running, and people were knocking on people's doors, just trying to get to the phone to call their parents. I looked up the street, and I would just see kids everywhere knocking on these homes, and people would say, my phone's not working. Nobody's phone worked at all because all the phone lines were so busy. We would get to a house and they'd be like, my phone's not working. It's a busy signal. And like my friend would have her cell phone. She's like, it's a busy signal. Like everyone, we just couldn't call anyone. So as we continued, we ran down to the Leawood Elementary School. And I sat there for about 2 hours waiting for my parents to come. And meanwhile, I just had to write my name on a paper, and they would fax all of our names over to the Columbine Library. Because some kids would run over there and some kids would run over to the Leawood. That was the only two places that kids were told to run. So they would fax each other information back as names so the parents would know where that child was at. So I remember just sitting there, so cold too. I was freezing because I was just had on just my jeans and a shirt, and you're so scared. I had nothing else. I just remember sitting there by myself while everyone's around me, just cold.
But probably in shock, right?
Yeah, shock. Just didn't know what to really think. I mean, now looking back so many years later, I was just in shock. I just felt blah. But where's my parents? When are they going to be here? Do they know I'm alive? Because I hadn't talked to them. Nobody could talk to anyone. I just sat there for about 2 hours. I would go up randomly to a teacher and say, have you heard from my parents? They're like, we don't know any parents, or you just have to wait. I'm sorry. And we'd go, and I just had to wait and wait. They wouldn't let us exit the building. I was very hungry too. I wasn't hungry, but I felt hungry. But I felt also sick to my stomach. So there was people like here passing out, like the school was passing out like drinks. And I remember just looking at this bottle of apple juice because we're in an elementary school and thinking I need to drink that, but I feel so sick to my stomach, you know? All of a sudden, I looked up and my brother yelled, Lacey, and ran through this line of people. And then my dad just in the corner, and I saw him. And I ran up to them and I just hugged him so tight, just thankful to see someone in my family. And we left, and we had to take the long way out of the school. Went up and around the school, up through the neighborhood. And I got home, and my mom just was sitting in the driveway, just bawling, just, Lacey. And I hugged her, and I came into the house just sobbing. And I said, Mom, I need to know where Kelly's at. She's like, what do you mean? And I'm like, Kelly. I'm like, she went to the library. I'm like, I don't know where she was at. She's like, I'm sure she's fine. And I'm like, I don't think she's fine, Mom. She's like, why would you say that? And I was like, because she went to the library. And she said, Lacey, let's go watch the news. I'm sure she's fine. I still wanted to call her mom, but I couldn't. The phone lines were still down. So I turned on the news with my mom sitting there. It was just devastating watching what was happening. I would still watch. It was live. So it's like live at the Columbine Library is, these people looking for their parents. And there was Isaiah Scholl's father sitting outside of Leawood Elementary for hours. Oh. And at this point, I would turn on the news even hours after being home. and saw Isaiah Scholl's dad still standing outside that school. And I remember him being only the almost parent out there, just waiting for his son. And so by this point, I said, Mom, I think Kelly died. And she's like, Lacey, we don't know that. Don't say that. And I said, no, Mom, I think she died. And she said, no, don't say that. And I said, I had a chance to help her, and I couldn't. She said, well, let's try to sleep, Lacey, because at this point it's like 11 o'clock. Let's try to sleep. I laid there in my mom's arms for hours, so scared. I asked her to turn on all the lights. I needed them all on. She said, even the basement ones? And I said, yes, please, Mom, I'm scared. She did. She sang me songs and scratched my back, and it sounds ridiculous, but I was really scared to fall asleep that night. And I woke up, and I quickly turned on the news, and I said, Mom, have you heard anything from Kelly's mom? And she said, no. I tried to call her mom this morning, but she didn't answer. And I said, okay, I'm going to try to call her. So I tried to call her again. Couldn't get a hold of her, so I left her message. And I want to make sure Kelly got home. And I didn't hear back from her. She ended up calling me that night and said, no, Lacey, she never made it home. She was killed in the library. And I said, what do you mean she was killed in the library? And she said, they shot her 5 times in the chest. And I just said, I tried so hard to get her to come with me. Like, why didn't she come with me? And she said, Lacey, it was her time. When someone goes, it's under God's will. It's her time. And I just remember being like, I understand that, but like, why would he want her to go like that? And she said, I'll come over. Because I was really close with Kelly. And I'm thinking, no, your daughter just died. Don't come over here. Like, what can I do for you? And she did. She came to my house that next day. And she was so strong. And you can tell she was hurting. She was crying. So when she was telling me what happened, Kelly woke up that day from school, got ready for school, and she had gotten in a little argument with her mom about a teacher at school. She was kind of a mean teacher. Kelly would ask a question, and she would just be really short with her, and was like that with a lot of students. So Kelly always thought she had something out for her, and I kept saying, no, this is just the way the teacher is. She's just rude. And so Kelly had gotten in an argument with her mom that morning about this teacher and said, I am not going to class. I'm not going to see this teacher. And her mom says, yes, you are. You know, you're going. And she dropped her off at school, and Kelly, no joke, honest story is Kelly looked her mom in the eye and said, I can't believe you're making me go to class. And her mom says, you need to go to class. And she said, I hate you. She shut the door.
Oh.
And she walked into that school. So the mom, D. Fleming, that was her last words her daughter said to her is, I hate you. And I told her the teacher was mean. She was probably she was upset. She loves you. And I comforted her and said, of course she doesn't hate you. But she felt angry because this teacher was really mean. So days had passed just trying to get through this tragic moment in my life. I would wake up in the middle of the night just with nightmares, just dream after dream. I ended up going to counseling because the school offered free counseling out to all the students. So I went and used that. I talked to a couple people about it, but I only went about 5 or 6 times. And then I felt better at the time. I mean, I just felt like I didn't need the counseling. I was also working full time at Dairy Queen at the time, so I still had to go to work. I remember one time driving home from work, and this is about like 10:30 at night, and something happened with my car. So I pulled off on the side of the road, looked under my car, and I remember having a car pass me and like honk. And I got up really fast, and my heart started pounding. I looked around me like, oh my gosh, am I safe? And then I started noticing like any loud noise, it would just startle me. So I noticed that little things would trigger me as time passed by. After about, I believe, 2 weeks after the shooting had occurred, we were able to go inside the school to get our bags and to see parts of the school we wanted to. They closed off the library completely because that's where most of the deaths happened. So nobody got to go there. But walking down some of those halls, you would see gunshots just in the glass. You'd have a door and you have that little square glass part. You'd see gunshots just in it. You would see gunshots in lockers. So I can't imagine how much between the two layers of the school, how much gunshots were actually done, how many shots were fired, because there were so many gunshots. I remember going to recover my backpack that I left there because everyone just dropped everything and ran. And in my backpack, some of my papers were still wet from the sprinkler, the alarm going off.
Wow.
And it was just like crazy. I cannot believe this happened. As time passed, I would still just try to live every single day. But I always felt like I could have saved Kelly's life. From the moment I asked her to step out of that school and go to lunch, I never gave up. And I prayed about it and prayed about it and prayed about it. And one day I got a very reassuring feeling. I was sitting in my room getting dressed. I looked at my clothes in my closet and I thought, Heavenly Father, why didn't you let me save her?
Yeah.
I wanted to grab her, Heavenly Father. I wanted just to grab her and say, you're coming with me. Let's go. And something knocked me to the ground. Something came under my legs and I fell. I started praying again and I said, I know why I couldn't save her. Because you needed her home. Something lifted me up off that floor. And I stood up and I stopped crying. And I said, you know what? It's not my fault. And I instantly felt peace. I felt like I don't have that guilt. And I looked at all my walls in my bedroom like, what just happened? I literally fell to the ground. And I don't know what happened. But I'm pretty sure that I had an angel watching over me at that time saying, you know what, stop feeling guilty. You tried, but it was not the right thing for Kelly.
Mm-hmm.
So till this day, I still have Kelly's picture hanging on my wall. I periodically look up in the sky and just say, hi, Kelly. I mean, so many years have passed now, but I know that she's still looking over me. I also think of all the other families. I mean, because it's been so many years, it has gotten easier, much easier, in fact. But I still feel like some things will trigger me. But I do have to add that miracles are happening with Kelly's mom. She sent me a photo a few years ago of a cloud in the sky, and it looks almost identical to Kelly's gravestone. It's a big angel reading this book. You see these humongous wings and this girl holding a book. And she took a picture. You take the gravestone and this picture and sit side by side, and it is almost identical.
That's amazing.
And she said that's her most favorite picture in the world because she believes it's Kelly. Just
saying hi.
Mom.
I love that.
What I got out of the Columbine shooting was just to cherish every moment you have with family because you never know. And if something happens that's tragic to a family member, not to blame God. I still don't know why she had to get shot, but one day I will know my answer. And I keep telling him that, but I do know that it was never my fault. I could have gotten her out of that school, but because I didn't, it was just how God wanted it to be. And why, I don't know, but I will always have a close relationship with Kelly's family. I still do till this day. My mom made me this scrapbook of the Columbine shooting, and it is like 6 inches thick from just the newspaper articles and the things that people sent me and pictures and cards. And I have that in my memory box. I have my Columbine blanket my graduation blanket that I got. So I have certain things that I will always own and remember Columbine. But I try now to just see the good in everyone and just try to live life to the fullest. Sometimes it's so hard because, you know, we have feelings in our bodies and anger and impatience sometimes. But if I could just pause and say, you know what, try to live life to the fullest and love everyone because you never know when your time is, you know, that's how I felt. And when I went to bed that night after the Columbine shooting, that's when I thought, no wonder why I woke up feeling so numb that day. And now I can see why. It's because I went through a day that I will never forget.
And isn't that interesting? I find that interesting that you, on some level, whether it was a spiritual level, but you could feel it on a physical level, you had an intuition that something was different that day, right from the
Absolutely.
beginning.
Right from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
I
Very
woke
interesting.
up and, I mean, I'm not a morning person either. I woke up and thinking, oh, I don't want to go to school. But I noticed right away, like, oh, I feel a little weird.
Yeah. Very interesting. And I'm so grateful for you, in your case, to have that moment when you were praying, to know that, I guess, to feel that release of guilt, that it wasn't your fault.
Yeah, it was years later. I just had held this. I mean, I always told myself, like, probably, it's probably not my fault. But deep down inside, I always held it in and I always felt guilty.
Mm-hmm.
But it was that one day that something knocked me down, and I know it was meant to tell me, no,
Yeah.
it's not.
Time to let it go. Time
To
to.
let it go.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I have. And I honestly still sit here and I feel completely at peace that, you know what? It's okay.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That is a miracle, that moment. Wow.
Yes.
Well, Lacey, thanks for sharing that story. I remember when that hit the news and it was just this national tragedy and all of us were just glued to the TV and in shock over it. How many actually died during that shooting? Do you remember?
Yeah, I believe it was 19. And Isaiah Scholes was one of those two. He just never made it home.
Mm-hmm.
And I would sit on the bus with him every day, unless him or I were sick or something. But we would just chit chat. He lived down the street from me. He was just a sweet kid. He was so funny. I remember laughing so many times at something he said because he was just funny. He had a good sense of humor.
Mm.
Oh, my heart breaks for that dad because that night he just waited and waited and waited.
Oh, yeah, so sad. Well, thank you very much for sharing that.
Of course. I've shared the story quite a bit times, but sometimes it just hits you still. Sometimes I don't cry, but sometimes I'm like,
yeah. Yeah.
There definitely are angels out there, that's for sure.
I agree. I know it's true. Well, thank you.
Absolutely.
All right, well, that's our episode. Thanks for spending this time with me. And this week, maybe you could spend some time reflecting on your loved ones and making the time you have with them beautiful. And also, I would encourage us all to reflect on the emotions in our past that we're holding on to and the things that we'd like to let go of, whether it's guilt or resentment or sorrow, something that we've just been carrying for a while. Offer a prayer to let it go. I love that story and the lessons that Lacey learned from her experience. And again, I want to read this serenity prayer, which I just love. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. And if you have a miracle story that you'd like to share on the podcast, please submit it on wondersandmiracles.com. And again, thanks for spending some time with me and celebrating the miracles everywhere, because the more miracles we notice, the more miracles happen.